Andre Whitfield was 38 years old, and for 7 years he'd let his wife believe he was ordinary. A logistics coordinator, a man who drove a 12-year-old Honda and split the grocery bill down to the dollar. What Camille never knew was that her husband owned a luxury transportation empire worth tens of millions, and Andre had built it that way on purpose, terrified of ever being loved for his money instead of himself. That Tuesday afternoon, he pulled into his driveway and found his suitcases already packed on the lawn. His wife stood on the porch with her mother, telling the gathering neighbors that Andre was dead weight. She was finally cutting loose, while another man's car idled just down the block, waiting to take his place. Andre didn't argue. He didn't beg. He simply took out his phone and made one call. And in that quiet, humiliating moment, Camille Whitfield had no idea her entire world was about to turn the corner behind him. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. The alarm never woke Andre Whitfield. He was already up. 4:47 a.m. He sat on the edge of the bed in the dark, lacing his shoes with the careful, quiet movements of a man who had done this 10,000 times. The room was still. Camille lay on her side of the bed with her back to him, one arm curled under her pillow, breathing slow and even. She hadn't stirred when he got up. She never did anymore. He didn't mind the quiet. He was built for it. He stood, straightened his collar in the dark, and carried his jacket out to the hallway before putting it on. The hallway light was dim and yellow. He checked himself once in the small mirror by the bathroom door. Plain navy shirt, plain gray slacks, sensible black shoes. Nothing that said anything about anything. That was the point. He went downstairs, made coffee in a plain white mug, drank it standing at the kitchen counter, and was out the door before 5. The Honda sat in the driveway like it always did. A 2017 Accord in a color the dealership had called Lunar Silver, but was really just gray. One small dent above the rear wheel well. A pine tree air freshener on the mirror. Andre got in, adjusted the seat out of habit, even though no one else drove it, and pulled out onto the empty street. His phone buzzed on the center console. Board MTG. 7:00 a.m. confirmed. Attendance required. He silenced it without looking up. 3 more notifications followed. He silenced those too. The office where Andre worked, where he told people he worked, was a regional logistics firm called Hartwell Distribution, a company with beige walls and a break room that always smelled faintly of burnt microwave popcorn. He had taken the operations coordinator job 7 years ago and stayed in it on purpose. It was a good cover, useful hours, unremarkable enough that no one ever thought to ask too many questions. "Morning, Andre," said Deb at the front desk, not looking up from her monitor. "Morning, Deb." "Coffee's already burnt." "When isn't it?" She laughed a little. He smiled and kept moving. That was the full length of what most people at Hartwell knew about him: steady, quiet, polite. A man who showed up on time and never made a fuss. Marcus from receiving had once said Andre was the kind of guy you forget is in the room until he says something smart. Marcus had meant it as a compliment. Andre had taken it as one. He ate lunch at his desk, a turkey sandwich from home, wrapped in wax paper by his own hand that morning. His phone buzzed twice more, one from Tobias, his COO, marked Q3 fleet numbers ready when you are, and one from Yolanda, his attorney, marked reviewed the Atlanta acquisition docs. Call me. He read both, typed back short replies, then turned the phone face down and finished his sandwich. Nobody at Hartwell looked twice at him. That was by design. He got home at 6:15 to find Camille on the couch with her legs tucked under her, laptop open, phone in her other hand. She didn't look up when the door opened. She didn't say hello. "Hey," Andre said. He set his keys on the hook by the door and moved into the kitchen. He could see the TV was off. The house was quiet in a different way than the morning. Not peaceful, just empty. Hollow in a way that had nothing to do with sound. He reheated leftovers. She stayed on the couch. After a while she called out, not really to him, more just into the air. Preston Boyd just listed a property in Edgemont. 4 bedrooms, 3 baths, custom everything. She turned the laptop around to show him the screen, though he was across the room and couldn't really see it. People are actually building things out there, actually moving. Andre looked over. "Looks nice." "It is nice." She turned the screen back. "Must be what ambition looks like." He didn't answer that. He ate his food standing at the counter. She needed her keys after dinner. Couldn't remember where she'd put her purse. He found it on the chair by the door, reached inside to feel around. Lip balm, her wallet, a folded gum wrapper, and his fingers closed around a small, stiff rectangle of paper. He pulled it out thinking it was a business card. It was a hotel receipt. Harmon Suites. Room 214. Check-in, Tuesday, March 4th. He stood very still. March 4th was the Tuesday she'd texted him that she was working late. Then the next morning over coffee she'd mentioned the girls' trip, and he'd nodded along and asked no questions because he trusted her. He turned the receipt over. Nothing on the back. He set it in her hand along with her keys. "Found them," he said. She took them without looking. Andre walked back into the kitchen, rinsed his plate, and said nothing. His face gave nothing away, but inside something had gone very still. The kind of still that comes right before a man decides to stop being careless. He would watch, he would wait, and he would learn exactly what he was dealing with before he said a single word. The next evening, Camille dressed like she meant it. A black wrap dress, small gold earrings, her good heels, the ones she kept in the original box and never wore just anywhere. She stood at the bathroom mirror with the door half open, brushing on powder while Andre sat on the edge of the bed and watched her without making it obvious he was watching her. "It's a networking thing," she said. "Not to him exactly, just in his direction. Chamber of Commerce. Could run late." "Okay," Andre said. "I'll be here." She picked up her purse, the big one, not the everyday one, and checked herself one more time in the mirror. Whatever she saw there seemed to satisfy her. She walked past the bedroom door and down the stairs without stopping to say goodbye. The front door opened. Then it closed. Andre stayed on the edge of the bed for a moment, listening to the silence settle back in. Then he got up, went down the hall, and opened her laptop. She'd asked him to look at it 2 days ago. "The Wi-Fi keeps dropping," she'd said. "Fix it when you get a chance." He'd put it off, and she hadn't pushed. Now the laptop sat on the small desk in the corner of the spare room. Lid closed, charger plugged in. He opened it. The screen came on without needing a password. She'd never been careful about that kind of thing. A browser was already open. He wasn't looking for anything specific, not yet. He went into the network settings, checked the connection diagnostics, reset the DNS cache. Standard fixes. 2 minutes of work. He was about to close the lid when he saw the cloud drive icon in the toolbar. He had almost kept going. Almost. He clicked it. Most of the folders were ordinary. Tax documents, a folder of old photos, recipe saves. But near the top, sorted by most recent, was a folder with a name that stopped him cold. New Beginning. He stared at it for a moment. Then he clicked it open. There were 11 files inside. A spreadsheet titled Move-In Costs. Final. He opened it. Every expense was itemized down to the dollar, security deposit, first month's rent, furniture estimates, a line item for movers. At the top of the page, in the header cell, was an address on Callaway Drive that he didn't recognize. He opened the next file. A rental lease application, partially filled out. 2 names in the co-applicant fields: Camille A. Whitfield, Preston J. Boyd. Andre read the names twice. His hands were steady. His face was steady. But somewhere behind his sternum, something pulled tight like a wire going taut. He kept going. There were screenshots, text message threads, copied into a document and saved as a PDF. He scrolled through them slowly. Camille and her mother, Patrice. Message after message, going back further than he'd expected. Pages of them. He's never going to change, Mama. I've made up my mind. You need to control the story before he does, baby. Tell people about the money stuff first. I already talked to Keisha and Renee. They know he's been bad with the finances. Good. By the time you file, everyone will already feel sorry for you. Preston thinks we can be in the new place by the end of the month. What about the house? He'll have to go. I've got a plan for that, too. The last message in the thread was from 3 days ago. It's almost time. Just stay calm and let it play out. Andre sat back. He looked at the screen for a long moment without moving. The room was quiet. The laptop's fan hummed softly. Outside, a car passed on the street, and the headlights swept across the wall. He closed the laptop. He stood up, walked downstairs, and went out the back door into the yard. The night air was cool. He stood on the small concrete patio and looked up at the dark sky for a moment, breathing evenly. Then he took out his phone and called Tobias. It rang once. "Talk to me," Tobias said. Andre kept his voice low and even. "It's time. Move." A brief pause. When Tobias spoke again, his tone had changed completely. All the warmth gone, replaced by something clean and ready. "I'll start tonight." "Good." Andre ended the call. He stood outside for another minute. Then he went back inside, washed his hands at the kitchen sink, and started making tea like nothing had happened. Camille came home at 10:30. She smelled like perfume and restaurant food. She moved through the house with a certain lightness to her step, like someone who had just come from a place where she felt like herself. Andre was on the couch with a book. He looked up. "Good night?" "Productive," she said. She set down her purse and moved toward the stairs. "I fixed the laptop," he said. She paused on the second step. "Thanks." No eye contact. He went back to his book. She was nearly at the top of the stairs when she stopped and leaned on the railing, looking down at him with something in her eyes he couldn't quite name. Not quite guilt, not quite victory. Something in between. "Things are going to change around here soon, Andre," she said. Her voice was quiet, but there was a hard edge under it. "Just so you know." He turned a page. "Okay," he said simply. She stood there a moment longer, like she'd expected more. Then she went to bed. Andre stared at the page without reading a word. The day passed like any other. Andre sat in his office, answered his emails, ate lunch at his desk. He moved through every hour with the same quiet steadiness he always did. Nobody looked at him twice. Nobody ever did. He knew what was waiting for him at home. He'd known since last night. He drove back the same way he always drove, down Mercer, left on Pickett, right on Sycamore. The Honda rattled slightly at the turn, same as it always did. The evening sun was low and orange, cutting long shadows across the lawns. He turned onto his street and stopped the car. The bags were already out. 4 of them, lined up in a row on the front lawn like luggage left at a curb. His brown duffel, his gray suitcase, 2 cardboard boxes sealed with tape, stacked neat. waiting. He sat there for a moment, engine idling, looking at them. Then he pulled forward and parked. Camille was on the porch. Patrice stood one step behind her, arms folded, wearing a satisfied look she wasn't trying to hide. Two neighbors had already drifted toward the edge of their yards. An older woman across the street stood frozen with a garden hose, watching. André stepped out of the car and walked to the middle of the lawn, unhurried. "I changed the locks," Camille said. Her voice carried. She'd meant it to. "You don't live here anymore." André looked at her. He said nothing. That seemed to bother her. She stepped down from the porch, heels clicking on the steps, and stopped at the edge of the grass. Her chin was lifted. Her jaw was set. She had rehearsed this. He could tell. 7 years, she said, loud enough for the whole block to hear. 7 years, and you never once stepped up. Never once made me feel like I had a future with you. She gestured at the bags with an open hand. I deserve a real man, a man who can actually provide, not someone who's been coasting his whole life on someone else's coattails. Patrice made a small sound of agreement from the porch. Down the block, half a block back, a silver Mercedes sat with its engine running. André had noticed it the moment he turned onto the street. He didn't look at it now. He didn't need to. "You've got nothing to say?" Camille pressed. Her voice cracked slightly, not with emotion, but with frustration. She had wanted a scene, a fight, something she could use later. He looked at her calmly. Then he reached into his jacket pocket and took out his phone. "What are you doing?" she said. "André, what are you doing?" He pressed one number, held the phone to his ear. It rang once. "We're ready, Mr. Whitfield," the voice on the other end said. "Come on," André said. That was all. He ended the call and put the phone back in his pocket. For a moment, nothing happened. Camille looked at him. Patrice looked at him. The neighbors stood in their yards, watching, waiting for some kind of argument they could talk about later. Then someone heard it. A low hum, steady and smooth, like a sound that had been carefully engineered not to disturb anyone, and yet impossible to ignore. One of the neighbors looked up the street first. Then the woman with the garden hose turned her head. The first one came around the corner, white, long, the hood ornament catching the last of the evening sun. Then the second one, right behind it. Then the third. Then more, rolling in a clean, slow formation, each one spaced perfectly apart, each one identical, each one gleaming like something out of a dream or a fever or a film that regular people only saw in theaters. 12 Rolls-Royces turned onto the block. They came to a silent, unhurried stop along the curb, one by one, filling the street in both directions. 12 drivers in dark uniforms stepped out in near-perfect unison. They were crisp, professional. They stood beside their vehicles with their hands clasped and their eyes forward. The driver of the lead car walked toward André first. He was a tall man, silver at his temples, with the steady bearing of someone who had been doing this for years and was proud of it. He stopped in front of André and gave a small, formal nod. "Mr. Whitfield, sir," he said. "Ready when you are." The other drivers echoed it, one by one down the line. "Mr. Whitfield." "Ready, sir." "Whenever you are, Mr. Whitfield." The street had gone completely silent. Camille stood on the lawn with her mouth slightly open. The performance she'd built, the rehearsed speech, the staged bags, her mother at her back, Preston idling down the block ready to swoop in, all of it had dissolved into something she didn't have words for. Her eyes moved from the cars to the drivers to André and back again, trying to fit it together, unable to. Down the street, the silver Mercedes had gone very still. André picked up his brown duffel, The lead driver immediately stepped forward to take the rest. Andre let him. He walked to the lead car. The driver opened the door. Andre got in. The door closed behind him, soft and solid as a vault. He did not look back at Camille. He did not wave. He did not smile. He did not give her the satisfaction of a single word. The motorcade pulled away from the curb in formation, slow and smooth, and rolled down the street until it was gone. The estate sat at the end of a private road off Highway 9, behind a gate that didn't advertise itself. No number on the post, no mailbox, just a black iron gate framed by two old oak trees whose branches had grown into each other overhead, forming an arch that looked like it had been there longer than anything else in the county. Andre had bought the property 6 years ago, held it under the Whitfield family trust, and told exactly 3 people it existed: Tobias, Yolanda, and his accountant. He'd driven past it every week for years, without ever feeling the need to show it to anyone else. The gate opened when his car approached. It always recognized the lead vehicle. He stepped out into the cool night air. The main house was lit from inside, warm amber light pressing through the tall windows, spilling out across the stone driveway. Tobias's truck was parked near the side entrance, exactly where he always left it. The dining table had been converted into something else entirely. Tobias had been here for hours. That much was clear. Papers were spread across the full length of the table in careful rows, each one weighted at the corner with a small clip. A laptop sat open at one end, its screen filled with columns of numbers. 2 yellow legal pads, both nearly full, sat beside it. There was a half-empty coffee mug pushed to the corner, like it had been forgotten about mid-thought. Tobias stood when Andre walked in, but he didn't say anything yet. He just looked at him, taking stock. "You good?" he asked. "I'm fine," Andre said. Tobias nodded once. He'd known Andre long enough to know that fine from him meant something different than it did from other people. It meant he was still upright, still thinking, still in control. "Then sit down," Tobias said, "because what I found is going to take a minute." They started with the joint checking account. Standard household stuff, groceries, utilities, insurance. The cable bill, Camille always complained, wasn't big enough. Andre had reviewed these statements before, casually, the way most people do. A glance, a rough total. Nothing that ever raised a flag. Tobias had gone deeper. "Look at this line here," he said, tapping a highlighted row on the 3rd page of a bank statement dated 38 months ago. $260. It's coded as a home maintenance transfer. You remember authorizing any home maintenance that month? Andre studied it. No. Neither does the account it went to. Tobias flipped to a separate page, a different institution's statement, an account Andre had never seen before. The name on the header was C. Whitfield, not their joint name, hers alone. This is where it lands, every time. He turned the page again. Another month, another transfer. The amounts varied, sometimes 180, sometimes 400, once nearly 900, buried in a month where 3 other large bills had gone out, and the total might have blurred together to anyone not looking hard. Over 3 years, across dozens of transactions, it added up to just over $41,000. Andre leaned back in his chair. He looked at the number for a long moment without speaking. "And that account," Tobias said, sliding a second stack of papers forward, "made regular outgoing payments to a business account." He pointed to the name printed at the top. Boyd Property Group, LLC. Andre looked at the name. He kept his face still. "Preston's company," Andre said. "What's left of it?" Tobias said. "I pulled the public filings. Boyd Property Group has been operating at a loss for over 4 years. No completed sales on record in the last 2.5 years. 2 liens filed against the business address. He's been holding the whole thing together with tape and other people's money. He paused. Specifically, your money. The room was quiet. The clock on the wall ticked. Outside, something moved in the tree line, a branch settling, a night bird shifting. Andre thought about the hotel receipt he'd found in Camille's purse, the careful way she'd dismissed it. He'd thought then that it was something new, something recent, a fire that had just started. It hadn't just started. It had been burning for 3 years while he'd been sitting in the same house with her, eating dinner at the same table, waking up in the same bed. Every morning he'd left for work. Every evening he'd come home. She had been quietly dismantling the floor underneath him. He pressed 2 fingers against the bridge of his nose. This wasn't just cheating, he said. It wasn't a question. No, Tobias said, it wasn't. Tobias let the silence sit for a few seconds. Then he leaned forward and folded his hands on the table. Andre, you need Yolanda on this tonight, not tomorrow. Tonight. Because if there's this much sitting in what I can pull, I don't want to know what she's going to find when she starts digging. Andre looked at the papers spread across the table. The neat columns, the highlighted rows, 3 years of decisions that had been made without him, around him, against him. He picked up his phone. He pulled up Yolanda's number and pressed call. She picked up on the second ring. Yolanda, he said, I need you in the morning. All of it. Yolanda Price's office was on the 14th floor of a building in the financial district that didn't have its name on the outside. That was intentional. Her clients paid for discretion first and results second, and she delivered both. The conference room she used for serious work was smaller than people expected. No long boardroom table, no power wall of framed degrees, just a round table that seated 6, good lighting, and a whiteboard that had seen things that would never leave that room. Andre arrived at 7:45. Marcus Webb, the forensic accountant Yolanda kept on retainer, was already there, his laptop open, a portable hard drive plugged into the side of it. He was a quiet, compact man in his late 40s who spoke in measured sentences and never wasted a word. Tobias had stayed up most of the night scanning documents and organizing the files into a shared folder. Everything was already loaded by the time Andre sat down. Yolanda set a coffee in front of him without asking. "Talk to me," she said. Andre walked her through it steadily. The hotel receipt, the cloud folder, the move-in spreadsheets, the lease with Preston's name on it, the plan to paint Andre as financially irresponsible to justify removing him from the house. Then he slid the printed bank records across the table. Yolanda read without interrupting. Marcus had already pulled the same data up on his screen and was cross-referencing it against a second set of figures, his eyes moving between columns with the calm focus of someone who did this every day. 41,000, Yolanda said, more to herself than anyone. She tapped the total. Over 38 months. Consistent. Patterned, Marcus said. Whoever set this up knew how to keep the individual amounts small enough not to trigger a review. Nothing over 1,000 in a single transfer. That's not accidental. No, Yolanda said. That's coached. She made a note on her legal pad. They worked through the records for another 20 minutes before Marcus stopped scrolling and leaned slightly closer to his screen. He was quiet for a moment, the kind of quiet that meant something had just changed. "Pull up the property file," he said. "The address on file for your primary residence." Andre gave it to him. Marcus typed, waited, then turned the laptop around. It was a home equity loan application. Andre's name was on it, his address, his income figures, And those numbers were wrong, inflated by nearly $60,000 from what he actually reported on a joint return. But it was the signature line that stopped everything. "That's not my signature," Andre said. The room went still. "I know," Marcus said. "The pen pressure is wrong. The letter formation is inconsistent with your actual signature on file. Whoever signed this practiced it, but not enough." He pulled up a side-by-side comparison he'd already prepared, as if he'd been expecting this. This application was submitted to a regional lender 7 months ago. It was declined. Income couldn't be verified. But the submission itself is documented. It's in the system. Andre looked at the comparison. His real signature on the left, the forgery on the right. They were close, not close enough. "There's more," Marcus said. He pulled up a series of screenshots, a messaging thread, printed and time-stamped. The number was Camille's. The contact she was writing to was labeled Mom. These were recoverable from the cloud backup on the joint account tablet. She never removed them. Yolanda leaned forward and read the thread herself. Her expression didn't change, but her jaw tightened. She slid the printout to Andre. The messages walked through it step by step. Patrice telling Camille which lender to use. Patrice explaining how to match the signature closely enough to pass an initial review. Patrice reminding Camille to use Andre's old pay stubs, the ones from 3 years back, because the numbers were higher then. "He never looks at that drawer," Patrice had written. "He trusts you too much." Andre set the paper down on the table. "This is fraud," Yolanda said. Her voice was even, clinical. "The forgery, the falsified income figures, the submission itself, that's a criminal exposure for both Camille and Patrice. Civil and potentially criminal. This isn't a divorce case anymore, Andre. This is a case." She stood and walked to the whiteboard, uncapped a marker, started building a structure, boxes, lines, dates, names. It went up fast, like she'd already been building it in her head. "I'm going to need everything Marcus has flagged, signed, and notarized," she said. "I want the prior lender contacted for their records. And I need you to do exactly nothing until I tell you otherwise. No calls, no texts, no contact." Andre's phone had been buzzing since 8 that morning. He'd felt it in his pocket throughout the entire meeting, steady, patient. Camille had no idea he was sitting 14 floors above the street while a forensic accountant dismantled every decision she'd made in the last 3 years. After Yolanda stepped out to make a call, he finally took out his phone. 7 texts, 2 voicemails. He opened the first voicemail. "Andre, it's me." Her voice was soft, careful. Nothing like the woman who had stood on that porch. "I know things ended badly, and I'm sorry for how it went down. But we're adults. We can handle this quietly, without lawyers making everything ugly. I think we both know this makes more sense if we sit down and talk. Call me back." He listened to the whole thing, every word. Then he deleted it. He looked across the table at Marcus, who was still working quietly, still pulling threads. "Tell Yolanda to keep building the file," he said. "I'm not ready to make contact yet." The new house was in a subdivision about 12 miles from the one Camille had just left, tan siding. A 2-car garage, a little cluster of potted plants by the front door that Camille had picked out herself, because she said first impressions mattered. She'd moved fast. Preston had moved faster. Within 4 days they had furniture in every room and a bottle of champagne in the refrigerator. Preston had even framed a photo of them and set it on the mantel above the fireplace, right in the center, where anyone walking in would see it first. Camille stood in the kitchen on a Thursday morning, still in her robe, scrolling through her phone while Preston made coffee. The silence between them felt easy. comfortable, like they'd already been doing this for years. "You hear anything from him yet?" Preston asked, not looking up from the coffee maker. "A couple more texts," she said. "Nothing serious. He's probably embarrassed." "Good." Preston set a mug in front of her. "Keep it that way." He leaned against the counter. He was dressed already, button-down, dark slacks, shoes that were a little too shiny for a Thursday morning at home. He always looked like he was about to walk into a meeting that didn't exist. "Camille," his voice shifted. The easy tone dropped a notch. "We need to talk about the settlement." She looked up. "We need to move on it," he said. "Soon. Before he gets people involved who are going to slow everything down and make it complicated." "He's not like that," she said. "Andre doesn't like confrontation." "Everyone's not like that until they are." Preston picked up his own mug. "I've seen it. People wait too long. The other party gets lawyers involved, and suddenly a clean split turns into 2 years of back and forth. You want that?" She didn't answer right away. "I want what's fair," she said. Preston smiled. It was a patient smile, the kind that meant he'd already made up his mind and was just waiting for her to catch up. "Then let's make sure fair happens on our schedule. Push for the conversation now. This week, if you can. The longer you wait, the worse your position gets." Camille took a sip of her coffee and nodded slowly, already reaching for her phone. She had no idea that 12 miles away, the man she was planning to pressure had already spent 3 days reading every decision she'd ever made. Marcus Webb didn't call. He never called. He sent a single message to Yolanda that read, "Found something? Come see it." By the time Andre and Tobias arrived at Yolanda's office that afternoon, Marcus had a second folder open on the table next to the first. Different state, different name on the documents, same pattern. "Her name is Donna Pierce," Marcus said. "Atlanta, 3 years ago." He turned his laptop so they could all see the screen. A civil complaint, filed and partially settled. Preston Boyd courted her for about 8 months. By the end of it, she'd co-signed a business loan for over $90,000 for a real estate venture he said was about to close. It never closed. The business dissolved. Donna was left holding the debt. Tobias leaned back in his chair and let out a slow breath through his nose. "Same playbook," Marcus continued. He introduced himself as a successful investor. He was charming. He moved things forward fast. He got her emotionally committed before the financial arrangement started. And then, when the money dried up, he was gone. Yolanda didn't say anything for a moment. She tapped her pen twice against her legal pad. "Camille wasn't chosen," Andre said. His voice was quiet and flat, not angry, just certain. "No," Yolanda said. "She was selected. There's a difference." Andre looked at the complaint on the screen. Donna Pierce, a woman in another city who probably still thought about what she'd missed. A woman who'd never seen it coming either. "Does she know about Camille?" Andre asked. "She does now," Yolanda said. "I reached out to her attorney yesterday. She's willing to cooperate." She let that land, then moved forward. "Which brings us to where we are." She stood and went to the whiteboard. It had been updated since the last meeting, more boxes, more lines, more dates. It looked like a map of everything Camille and Preston had built, laid out so clearly that it almost seemed fragile. "We have 3 things," Yolanda said, holding up one finger at a time. "The fraud, the forged signature, the falsified application, Patrice's messages coaching it, the financial pattern, 41,000, diverted over 3 years, documented and sourced, and Preston's prior conduct, a civil record and a willing witness." She capped her marker. "That's not a divorce case. That's a case that ends careers and starts criminal investigations. And the prenup covers the company, Tobias said. Every asset under the trust is untouchable, Yolanda confirmed. She gets nothing from Whitfield Executive Transit, nothing from the estate property, nothing from the investment accounts. The prenup she signed 7 years ago was written for exactly this scenario. The room was quiet for a moment. So we bring them in, Andre said. It wasn't a question. Yolanda nodded. One meeting. Controlled. On our terms. You let her think she's coming to negotiate. She picked up her pen. I'll reach out to Camille today and schedule the conversation. Yolanda made the call herself. No assistant, no email. She dialed Camille's number at 4:47 in the afternoon, and she kept her voice professional but unhurried, the way a person sounds when they believe they have all the time in the world. Ms. Whitfield, she said, my name is Yolanda Price. I'm Andre's attorney. He's asked me to reach out about arranging a time for both parties to sit down and have a direct conversation. He'd like to keep things simple, quiet. No courtrooms, if it can be helped. There was a pause on Camille's end. Then, he wants to talk? He does? Another pause, shorter this time. Okay, Camille said. Yes, tell him I'm open to that. She hung up and turned to Preston with the look of a woman who had just been proven right about something. That evening, Camille sat cross-legged on the new couch with her phone in both hands, telling her mother everything. Patrice listened. When Camille finished, Patrice made a sound low in her throat, the sound she always made before she said something she'd already decided. I'm coming with you, Patrice said. Mama, I'm coming. You don't walk into a room with lawyers alone. I don't care how simple he says he wants it. Her voice was firm, settled. You need somebody in that room who's thinking straight. Camille didn't argue. Truthfully, she hadn't wanted to argue. She'd wanted her mother to say exactly that. Preston was in the kitchen when she relayed the plan. He leaned in the doorway, arms crossed, and listened without interrupting, which was unusual for him. I'll be there too, he said when she finished. It's not really Camille. He said her name the way he always did when he needed her to slow down and listen to him. Patient, almost gentle. Think about it. Andre just had 12 cars pull up to your old house. He's not the man we thought he was. That changes what's possible in a settlement. He pushed off the doorway and walked toward her. I want to make sure you're protected. I want to be there. What he didn't say was simpler and harder than that. He wanted to see the size of what was available. He wanted to be in the room where the numbers were spoken out loud. Camille nodded. Okay, she said. Okay, you can come. She took that as love. It wasn't. The morning of the meeting, Andre was at Yolanda's office by 8 o'clock. The conference table had been cleared and reset. A neat row of folders sat on Andre's side, each one labeled in Yolanda's handwriting, each one holding something Camille had never expected him to find. Marcus Webb's work. 3 years of transactions mapped and sourced. A civil complaint from Atlanta with a woman's name on the front page. A photocopy of a home equity loan application carrying a signature that wasn't quite right. Andre stood at the window while Tobias settled into the chair at the far end of the table. Outside, the city was already moving, taxis and delivery trucks and people with their heads down and their coffee in their hands. You sleep? Tobias asked. Some, Andre said. Me neither. Tobias straightened the folder in front of him, even though it didn't need straightening. You good? Andre turned from the window. His face was calm. Not the forced calm of a man holding something back, but the settled calm of a man who had already accepted every difficult thing and was simply ready to move forward. Yeah, he said. I'm good. Yolanda walked in with her own coffee. set it down, and took her seat at the head of the table. She looked at the folders, then at Andrei, and gave him a single nod. "Let's go through it one more time," she said. They spent the next hour doing exactly that. Andrei didn't rush. He read every page Yolanda passed to him. He asked 2 quiet questions. He confirmed 3 dates. When they were finished, the folders were closed and stacked, and there was nothing left to review. Everything that needed to be ready was ready. They arrived separately, the way people do when they don't realize they're walking into the same thing. Camille came first. She was dressed carefully, a blazer, her good earrings, heels that said she took this seriously but wasn't desperate. Patrice walked in beside her, chin up, handbag on her arm, already scanning the reception area the way she scanned every room she entered. Preston arrived 7 minutes later. Shined shoes, a dark jacket, the confident, easy stride of a man who had never once in his life believed he was the least important person in any room he entered. The receptionist showed all 3 of them to the conference room without comment and offered water, which none of them accepted. Andrei was already seated when they walked in. Tobias was at the far end. Yolanda sat at the head of the table, her hands folded, her expression giving away nothing. The folders were closed in front of them. 3 chairs waited on the opposite side of the table. No one spoke first. That was the thing about a room like this. Everyone was waiting for someone else to blink. Camille sat with her hands folded on the table, her posture straight, her expression carefully arranged into something that looked like calm. Patrice sat to her left with her handbag in her lap and her chin lifted, already performing dignity before a single word had been said. Preston sat to Camille's right, one arm resting easy on the back of his chair, ankles crossed beneath the table. The picture of a man with nothing to hide. Andrei sat across from all 3 of them and said nothing. He just looked at them, steady, unhurried, the way a man looks when he already knows how the next hour is going to go. Yolanda spoke first. "Thank you all for coming. We're going to keep this straightforward." She didn't smile. She didn't need to. "Andrei has some things he'd like to share with you. I'd ask that you hold your questions until he's finished." Camille glanced at Preston. He gave her the smallest nod. "We've got this." Andrei reached for the first folder. He opened it slowly, slid a single page across the table, and turned it so Camille could read it. It was the home equity loan application. His name was printed on the signature line. Beneath it, in ink that almost matched, was a signature that wasn't his. The room shifted. Camille looked at the page. Then she looked up at Andrei. Her carefully arranged expression didn't collapse, not yet, but something behind her eyes moved. "That application," Andrei said, his voice even and low, "was submitted 8 months ago against the equity in our home. I never signed it." He paused. "You know that, and your mother knows that." Patrice's chin dropped, just a fraction, just enough. "Now hold on," Patrice started. "I'll ask you to wait," Yolanda said. Not unkindly, but there was no softness in it either. Patrice pressed her lips together. Her handbag shifted in her lap. Andrei reached for the second folder. He laid out the financial records 1 page at a time. Bank statements, transfer logs, 3 years of household budget withdrawals, moving into an account Camille had opened alone, in her name only, routed out in steady increments that were small enough not to alarm and large enough to matter. Tobias had highlighted each transfer in yellow. The column of numbers down the right side of the last page ran long. 3 years, Andrei said simply. He didn't say it with heat. He said it the way you'd read a date off a calendar. Every month for 3 years. Camille's jaw tightened. Preston shifted in his chair. A small movement, barely anything, but Andre saw it. The third folder held the timeline, photographs pulled from Camille's cloud backup, location data, hotel records, text threads printed and dated. The affair didn't start when Camille had implied it started. It started 22 months before she'd thrown Andre's bags onto the lawn. Almost 2 years of it, documented, dated, lined up in clean, unbroken order. Camille looked at the pages and said nothing. The composure she'd walked in with was still on her face, but it was thinner now, like a coat that had gotten wet. Preston leaned forward slightly. "Look," he said, his voice smooth, relaxed, doing the thing it always did when he needed to reframe something. "Those numbers need context. The real estate market those years was—" "Mr. Boyd?" Yolanda's voice was pleasant. "I'll get to you." Preston leaned back. He smiled, but it was the kind of smile a person makes when they're working to look like they're not worried. Yolanda stood. She walked to the conference room door and opened it. The woman who stepped in was in her early 40s. She wore a gray blazer and carried a leather portfolio under one arm. She walked to the empty chair at the end of the table, the one that had been there all morning, the one none of them had thought to ask about, and she sat down. She set her portfolio on the table and folded her hands on top of it, and she looked directly at Preston Boyd. Preston didn't move, but the easy set of his shoulders changed. Something went out of him, fast and quiet, the way air goes out of a room when a window closes. "This is Denise Hartwell," Yolanda said. "She lives in Atlanta. She has agreed to provide testimony regarding a near-identical financial arrangement Mr. Boyd entered into with her approximately 4 years ago, including the same pattern of courtship, the same redirection of her personal finances into a failing business, and the same exit once her resources were exhausted." Denise didn't say anything yet. She didn't have to. She just kept her eyes on Preston, steady and clear, the way a person looks when they have waited a long time for this exact moment and intend to use every second of it. Preston's smile was gone. Camille turned to look at him. She turned slowly, the way you turn when part of you already knows what you're going to see, and part of you is still hoping you're wrong. His face told her everything. Nobody moved for a long moment after Denise sat down. Preston was still staring at the table, not at Denise, not at Camille, just at the wood grain in front of him, like he was trying to find something in it. Camille's hands, still folded on the table, had gone white at the knuckles. Andre let the silence sit. He let it fill the room and settle into all the corners. Then he reached for the last folder. He slid it across the table. It landed in front of Camille with a soft, flat sound. She looked down at it. The words on the top page were small and dense, single-spaced legal text in a plain black font. But the title at the top was easy to read. Prenuptial Agreement, Andre J. Whitfield and Camille R. Odom, executed prior to marriage. Camille's breath changed. Just barely. Just enough. "You signed that 7 years ago," Andre said. "The Tuesday before our wedding. You were running late for a hair appointment, and you told your mother you didn't need to read the whole thing because there wasn't much to protect anyway." He paused. "You remember saying that?" Camille didn't answer. "I do," he said. He tapped the page with one finger. "Section 4, Paragraph 2. Any business entity founded, owned, or operated by Andre J. Whitfield prior to or during the marriage is classified as a separate asset and is not subject to division, claim, or settlement under any divorce proceeding." He let that land. Whitfield Executive Transit, the fleet contracts, the real estate holdings under the company trust, the accounts. Another pause. "None of it was ever yours to reach for, Camille. Not $1 of it. The plan you built with Preston, The one you've been working on for 3 years. It was never going to pay out the way you thought it would." Camille's eyes moved to Preston. He wasn't looking at her. Yolanda stepped forward, setting her own folder flat on the table and opening it without ceremony. "What I need you both to understand," she said, looking from Camille to Patrice with the kind of measured calm that felt more serious than shouting, "is that the home equity loan application changes the nature of this conversation entirely. Forging a spouse's signature on a financial document isn't a marriage problem. It's a crime." She let the word land without dressing it up. "Both of your signatures appear in the supporting correspondence around that application. That's not something we're willing to overlook." Patrice opened her mouth. "Mrs. Odom," Yolanda said quietly. Patrice closed it. "Andre has the right to file a formal fraud complaint with the district attorney's office," Yolanda continued. "He intends to do that." Camille looked across the table for the first time in several minutes. Really looked at Andre. Her expression was cracked open now, the careful arrangement of it long gone. Underneath was something that wasn't quite fear and wasn't quite grief. It was closer to the look of someone who had just realized the ground they were standing on had been paper the whole time. "Andre." Her voice was quieter than it had been all morning. "You don't have to do this." "I know," he said. "Then why—" "Because it happened," he said simply. "And pretending it didn't wouldn't be the truth. No heat in it, no satisfaction. Just the plain, unmovable fact of it." The chair to Camille's right scraped back hard against the floor. Preston stood up. He didn't look at Camille. He didn't look at Denise. He picked up his phone from the table, slid it into the inside pocket of his jacket, and smoothed the front of his coat with both hands. A man tidying himself up. A man already somewhere else in his head. "Preston?" Camille's voice caught on the word. He walked to the door. "Preston." Louder now, something close to desperation threading through it. He didn't stop. He didn't turn around. He pulled the door open and walked out into the hallway, and the door swung shut behind him with a soft, ordinary click that was somehow worse than a slam would have been. Camille stared at the door. Denise Hartwell looked down at her portfolio and said nothing. She had seen that exit before. She knew exactly what it meant, and so now did Camille. Patrice sat rigid in her chair. Her chin was still lifted, but the dignity she'd carried into the room had curdled into something brittle. She was staring at the table. She didn't reach for her daughter's hand. Camille sat between them, Preston's empty chair on one side, her mother's silence on the other, with 3 years of documents spread out in front of her, and nowhere left to turn. Andre gathered his folders into a clean stack. He slid his chair back. He buttoned the top button of his jacket, stood, and looked across the table one final time. He didn't say anything. There was nothing left to say that the room hadn't already said for him. He turned and walked toward the door. His steps were even and unhurried, the same as they had been all morning, the same as they had been for 7 years of early mornings and plain clothes, and a life kept deliberately out of sight. Yolanda fell in beside him. The door closed behind them both. The rental house Preston had signed for went back to the bank 11 weeks after the meeting. There was no dramatic announcement, no sheriff at the door with a camera rolling, just a notice taped to the front glass one Tuesday morning, and by Friday the locks had been changed by someone who wasn't Camille. She had 48 hours to get her things out. Preston was already gone by then, not just from the house, from the city. He had packed quietly over a long weekend while Camille was at her mother's, and when she came back, the closet on his side was empty, and his car was not in the driveway. No note, no call. Nothing but the faint smell of his cologne on the pillow and a drawer left open in the kitchen. Denise Hartwell's testimony had already been passed to the district attorney's office in the other state. Preston's prior scheme was now part of a paper trail with his name at the center of it. He had done the math before Camille did and decided his odds were better somewhere new. Camille found that out the same way she found out most things now. Too late. The fraud complaint was filed on a Thursday morning. Yolanda handled it with the same measured efficiency she handled everything. No press release, no announcement, just the documents, properly filed, properly delivered, and properly on record with the district attorney's office. Word still got out. It always does. By the following week, 2 women from Camille's old social circle had stopped returning her texts. By the week after that, a 3rd. The group chat she'd been part of for 4 years went quiet every time she typed into it. Then one morning she opened her phone and found she couldn't type into it anymore at all. She had been removed. Patrice felt it in her own world. She had been a fixture at her church for over 20 years, on the welcoming committee, on the hospitality board, a woman who knew everyone's name and expected hers to carry weight. It stopped carrying weight. People were still polite, but polite was different from warm, and Patrice had always known the difference, even when she pretended not to. The forgery had a way of following her into every room she entered. André did not watch any of it happen. He had the reports from Yolanda. He had the updates from the legal team. He read them the way he read quarterly earnings, carefully, without emotion, and then he filed them away and moved on. He did not feel satisfaction when Preston's name turned up in the district attorney's filings. He did not feel pleasure when he heard through Tobias that Camille had been removed from the group chat. He felt something quieter than any of that, something closer to the feeling of setting down a very heavy bag you'd been carrying for so long you'd stopped noticing the weight. He felt lighter. 2 years moved the way time does when a man stops holding his breath. Whitfield Executive Transit went national. New markets in Atlanta, Houston, and Chicago. Fleet contracts with 2 major hotel groups and 1 professional sports organization. A profile in a business magazine that Tobias framed and hung in the main office without asking permission, and which André pretended to be annoyed about for exactly 1 day. The foundation launched in the spring of the 2nd year. He named it after his father, the James Whitfield Entrepreneurship Fund. It provided mentorship, seed funding, and direct business coaching to young black entrepreneurs in 3 cities, with a 4th location already in planning. At the first cohort's graduation dinner, André stood at the front of a room full of young people who looked like him at 25, hungry, capable, waiting for someone to stop pretending the door wasn't there, and he talked for 20 minutes without any notes, and Tobias sat at a table in the back and did not bother hiding the fact that he was proud. André had also stopped hiding, not just the company, himself. He had met a woman named Renata through a mutual friend, and on their very first date he had told her what he did, what he owned, and what the last 7 years of his life had cost him. Not as a test, not as a warning, just as the truth, offered plainly, the way truth is supposed to be offered. She had listened. Then she had asked him about his father. Then they had talked for 3 more hours, and he had driven home feeling something he hadn't felt in longer than he could name. Easy. He had felt easy. He was in the back of the lead car on a Tuesday afternoon, heading to a site visit for the new Chicago office, when the motorcade moved through the older part of town on its way to the expressway. Tobias was beside him, talking through a staffing question. André was listening, but his eyes moved to the window. There was a retail storefront on the right side of the street, a home goods store, modest, the kind of place that sold candles and picture frames and things people bought when they were starting over small. Camille was behind the counter. She was in a red polo shirt with the store's logo on the chest. Her hair was pulled back simply. She was scanning something with a barcode reader, not looking up, and she looked smaller than he remembered. Not in height, just smaller. The particular smallness of someone the world had stopped making room for. Then she glanced up at the passing cars and she saw him. He knew she did. He saw her hand come up, slow, uncertain, not quite a wave. Andre looked at her for one moment. Just one. Then he turned back to Tobias and said, "Run me through the numbers again." The car moved on. The storefront fell behind them. The city opened up ahead, wide and bright and full of everything still to come. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.